Good afternoon and welcome. The main goal of all AAMI programs is to educate, retain, and graduate African American males that attend any college or university in Georgia. AAMI also provides social programming that will enlighten all program participants to become better graduates in our community, our state, and our nation. The success of AAMI and its mission will provide for a better overall education experience for all GSW students, staff, and faculty. Our motto is academic excellence and social responsibility. I would like to welcome all students, staff, faculty, alumni, and friends for supporting our program. Looking back to move forward. Again, welcome.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Let me say, our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God.
Good afternoon. I am glad I am at Georgia Southwestern for my second semester because I have enjoyed my newfound friends, my classes, and my instructors. Being a freshman has taught me that I am truly one of the most responsible for my education with the guidance and teachings of my professors. My education and my goal of graduating is the most important thing in my life right now, and I accept that responsibility with the most of dedication. I surely have been tested by my professors academically, but the tests that I have faced outside of the classroom in general are tests that will determine my character and my overall success in the close future. With the motivation and leadership of the African American Male Institute, I will return next academic year as a sophomore, more determined to fulfill the AAMI motto of academic excellence and social responsibility. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Our speaker today is a native of Americus, Georgia. He is the son of Mr. and Mrs. E.Z.L. Shelton. He is the youngest of the 9 children. As a young child, Mr. Shelton enjoyed playing sports and learning. He attended the Americus City Schools and graduated from Americus High School in 1990. He then attended Georgia Southwestern State University and graduated with a bachelor's in business administration and human resource management in 1995. In 1997, he decided to go back to school to get certified to become an educator. In 1998, he completed the teacher certification program at Georgia Southwestern. In 1998, he began teaching and coaching career for Sumter County Schools. He has been teaching and coaching at Sumter County Middle Schools for 17 years. He teaches the business and computer science class and engineering and technology course. He has served as CTA department chair and lead teacher for Connections team. He was selected as the 2014-2015 Teacher of the Year for Sumter County Schools. Coach Shelton, as he is known by many, is the head middle school football coach and has been since 2002. His Americus Sumter Middle School Panthers have won the conference championship in 2007, 2010, 2011, and 2013. He also coaches the Sumter County Middle School baseball team from 2002 to 2007, winning the conference championship in 2004. From 2007 to 2012, he served as the head golf coach at Americus Sumter High School before serving as middle school golf coach in 2013 and 2014. He served as Americus Sumter High School and Americus Sumter golf coach. In 2012, he became Sumter County Middle School basketball coach and continued to serve at this capacity. This season, his basketball team repeated as conference championships. Mr. Shelton's family consists of his wife, Trisha, and daughter, Madison, who is third grade at Sumter County Elementary. He is a member of Georgia Associate of Educators. He served as scholarship committee chair for the local graduate chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. In his spare time, he enjoys playing golf and attending sports events, especially with his daughter. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm hurricane welcome to one of our own, Mr. Rodney Shelton.
Good afternoon. As I come to the podium today, it's rather interesting to me to be here now, standing in this spot. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Anderson, the director of AAMI here at GSW, and the board members for inviting me today. I want to thank my family members who are here, who came out today to support me, my former students who also came out to support me, as well as my fraternity brothers who are here today. When Mr. Anderson asked me about doing the speaking here at the Black History Program, I was honored. I was surprised, but I was honored. Mr. Anderson and I go back quite a long way. I've known Mr. Anderson now for over 25 years. Back when I was in college, he was a teacher here at Georgia Southwestern, an instructor, and we played on the same intramural sports team. We played football together, we played basketball together, and funny thing about it is Mr. Anderson played center on our football team. I played quarterback. I know standing here looking at me, you would think it was the other way around, but you know, back then I was a little smaller, and the funny thing is, a little smaller, but the funny thing about Mr. Anderson is he's the same size now as he was back then. It's kind of amazing, really, 25 years later, nothing has changed about Mr. Anderson. I can remember when I met him, I was a barber at a barbershop here in Americus, and he probably doesn't even remember this. But I was a young guy, and I had just started cutting hair in the barbershop. And Mr. Anderson came in, and he sat down in my chair, and I cut his hair, and I had no idea who he was at the time. But 25 years later, I remember that as being the day that I met him, because once I came on campus, I knew who he was, and he was a fixture here on campus then, and I'm certain that he's a fixture on campus now. Just to give you a little bit of a background about me, he told you some things about me. I'm from Americas. I was born in Americas, raised in Americas. I went to school here in Americas, and I went to college here in Americas, and now I teach in Americas. So I'm about as Americas as you can get. I know some people who come to Americas and are from somewhere else could probably wonder, well, why would anyone stay there long? But if this is your home and you really and truly love it, you want to make a difference where you are. And that's who I am. I really want to make a difference where I am. As he said earlier, I'm the youngest of 9 children. My parents, my mother is 82, my father is 85. They still live alone, well, together, codependently. And I'm really proud of that because they've been married over 60 years. And there aren't a lot of people who can say that their parents are that age, nor can say that their parents were able to stay married together for over 60 years. And it's a wonderful thing. I have the type of father who remembers everything from when he was young. He and I can sit down and we can talk about anything that happened between 1930 when he was born. He says he remembers when he was 3. So we'll go from 1933 until about 2016. Everything that he's done, everything comes back. We can sit down and we can talk about things that happened when he was living in the rural country out in Webster County, out in Sumter County, and he was 9 years old and he had to learn how to plow a mule. Or my mom, who had to go out and pick cotton because that was what they needed to do in order to be able to survive. Those types of lessons that I learned as a kid still stick with me now. And it makes me appreciate the things that I have an opportunity to do myself. Fortunately for me, I've never had a career, never had a job that required me to do those things. I have an uncle who was a farmer who once asked me when I was a kid to go out and do some work with him. I spent about 5 or 6 hours out picking this and pulling those and harvesting that. And at the end of it, he gave me $4. Never forget it. I walked in the room with my mom, who was his sister, and I told her, if he ever calls back and says he wants me to come out and help him again, you just let him know I'm not available. Because I figured out that day that was not the job for me. Sometimes you live and you learn, and I realized then that was definitely not the job for me. But my parents, although neither of them were able to graduate from high school themselves, instilled something in all of their children. They instilled in us that it was important for us to get our education so that we had those options. See, if I didn't have the option of doing what I do now, then I might have to I might have to accept whatever option someone else gives me as far as what my career is going to be. But that was what they taught us. They told us that education was important. Education gives you options. And each one of you who are sitting here today, most of you are students, and I'm telling you as I stand here that get your education. Get as much as you can. There's a poster that sits in my hallway at school that says the only difference between a job and a career is education. If you want a career and you want to get an opportunity to pick the one that you want, be educated because it gives you those options. But as I was saying about my upbringing, my parents had 9 kids, and all of us had an opportunity to go on beyond high school and try to get more education. My sister, who's here today, was the first of us. She was my oldest. She's the oldest of my siblings. She was also the first one who went off and went to college. She went to Southwestern, and she went to Southwestern in the late 60s, and she was a PE major. So can you imagine a young black female in the late 60s in Americus, Georgia, being a physical education major? She was probably about the only one in all of her major classes as she sat there and dealt with all the things that went on with what was going on in society here in Americus, Georgia in the late 60s. It wasn't easy, but it taught me something. Her intestinal fortitude taught me what it was to believe in and follow through on the goals that you have for yourself. She had a goal, and she followed through on it. And 30 years later, she taught me what it was to retire. I'm still on my way to that goal. I'm at 18 now, and 12 years from now, I promised myself, 12 years from now, I'll be 56 years old. I'm going to walk out the classroom, I'm going to look back and say goodbye, and I'm going to go and do the things that I want to do in life. Because I've done what I needed to do in order to afford that, to give myself that opportunity. So as I was thinking about the topic that Mr. Anderson gave me, he gave me the theme. He called me and he told me the theme was going to be looking back to move forward. And I thought to myself, that's an interesting topic for a Black History program, because I am a bit of a history buff, just a bit. I'm not the #1 history buff in the world, but I do love a little history. And when I was a kid, one of the things that I would do when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I would read encyclopedias. I had a brother who was a little older than me, and he would do it. So I picked up the habit myself. So any encyclopedia that was in my house, if I heard somebody talking about something, I would go home and I would read it myself because I wanted to know more. So I'm a bit of a trivia guy as well. But it taught me something. It taught me a lot, actually. Now everyone is a Googler. Now you can pull out your phone and you can find out any facts that you want. But back when I was a kid, there was no Google. There was no computer. The only way that you were really going to learn anything was that you sat down and you read it. And so I learned then that it was important to read. I'm currently trying to read a book. I shouldn't say trying. I'm currently reading a book that I picked up, nephew. It's the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, Narrative of a Slave. And if you've never read the book, I challenge you to read the book. It is an interesting read. It is full of very valuable information, and it really gives you a good picture of what his life was like. And it wasn't easy. He taught, reading and listening to what he said gave me another introspect into what was going on in his time. And it's really an interesting read. But nevertheless, when I was a student here at Georgia Southwestern, and I spent, as you could tell by what Corey said, I spent 8 years, for the most part, here at Southwestern, between getting my undergraduate degree and then coming back to get certified to teach. I basically could say that I was here, on campus, whether a student or not, for about 8 years of my life. And I totally enjoyed my time here. But when I was here, I realized a few other things. It's really important, the type of impression you make on the people that you come in contact with. Because I'll use Mr. A for example. If Mr. A and I's interactions were not positive, then I wouldn't be standing here. And they all come from my time here at Southwestern. When I was a student here, I took a class from a guy whose name is Dr. Isaacs. Most of you have no idea who Dr. Isaacs is. But Dr. Isaacs was a professor here at Georgia Southwestern, and he was arguably the most intelligent person I've ever met in my life. Dr. Isaacs had a lot of knowledge. He was a walking book. He could tell you just about anything if you sat down and had a conversation with him. And I did. I used to talk to him after class sometime just to kind of probe him to see if I could find out more. And he was always willing to talk to me. I remember Dr. Isaacs. I took a world civilizations class from him my first semester. Well, it was quarters back then. My first quarter at Southwestern, I took world civilizations from him. I made an A in the class. That was the only A I made in my first quarter in college. And I learned a lot. There was a lot to be learned, and I learned a lot. And then later on, I ended up taking an African-American history class from Dr. Isaacs. It's funny that he was teaching the African-American history class, but when I found out he was teaching it, I signed up for it. Now, mind you, I was a human resource management major, so I had no reason whatsoever to take the African-American history class. But I didn't take it because I needed it. I took it because I wanted it. That's what college affords you. It affords you those opportunities. Sometimes you take classes because those are what's on the list for what you need. But sometimes you need to take classes because those are what you want, because there's something to be learned in every opportunity that you take advantage of. I also remember taking classes from Dr. Wilson. I think Dr. Wilson is now the dean over in the business school. At the time, they were just starting the human resource management program, and she was the instructor or the professor that taught almost all of those courses. And Dr. Wilson and I had a special relationship. She knew who I was, I knew who she was. She had expectations for me, I had expectations for her. We had more or less a one-on-one relationship. I called her Doc, she called me Rodney. Every time we see each other, that's the conversation that we had. Back then, she said she knew I was one of her favorite students, but I was also one of her most frustrating students because I was young And there were some things that were important to me then that probably shouldn't have been quite so important. One of them was my intramural sports teams. If Mr. A and I had a football game on the same night or a basketball game on the same night that I had my business class with Dr. Wilson, I would go in, because I took evening classes a lot. I'd go in, sit through that first hour, looking at the clock. If we had a game at 7, at 6:45, when we went on break, she said she knew that when we went on break, I was gone. Because she said, evidently, you must have had an intramural game. Unfortunately, that was important to me then, thinking that it was important, but realizing now I should have sat in those classes, because the B's that I got in her class could have been A's. And the difference truly probably was the amount of time that I spent in her class. So as a student, it's important for you to realize what is important. I know that most of you now, are students here at Southwestern and are taking these classes, and sometimes there are days that you really just don't want to go. Not because you're sick, but because you just don't feel like going. But what you miss in class that day could be something that could be vital for you and for your educational future. So it's really important that you attend those classes. I also remember my president at the time, a guy by the name of Dr. Capitan. Dr. Capitan was the president of the university. I don't ever recall actually being in the same room with Dr. Capitan and having a conversation with him. But as I told you earlier, it's really important that you understand the impression that you make on people. Because although he and I never conversed when I was in school, never had a real reason for talking, every time I see Dr. Capitan now, he does the same thing. He walks up to me. He says, "Hi, Rodney. How are you?" I said, "How you doing, Doc?" He said, "I'm fine. It's good to see you." In my mind, I'm thinking, I never really understood how in the world Dr. Capitan met me. Then one day, after I was announced as the 2014-15 Teacher of the Year for the system, he came up to me. I think we were at the post office. He said, "I always knew that you were going to do great things." And in my mind, I'm thinking again, how does he even know me? But that's the type of relationship, or that's the type of impression, evidently, I must have left on him when I was a student here at Southwestern. Now, am I saying that I was the greatest student Southwestern ever had? Absolutely not, because I just told you, I go to a football game or a basketball game instead of going to class with the best of them. But I also recognized that it was important to get my academics. It was important for me to study. It was important for me to make good grades so that when I graduated from college, if I decided to go into grad school, I would be prepared. I would be able to get into any school that I wanted to. That was my goal. And looking back on it, I realized how important those things are. Now, another decision that I made, or one of the greatest decisions that I made when I was here at Southwestern, I decided to become a part of a fraternity. Now, I know some of you may be in a fraternity now, but I personally think that I'm in the greatest fraternity on earth, the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. It is the greatest decision that I ever made. It taught me a lot. I learned a lot before I became an Omega, and I've learned a lot since I became an Omega. Not just a lot about Omega, but a lot about life. My fraternity is built on, or our fraternity is built on 4 cardinal principles: manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. And when I started thinking about this topic that we have, it made me think, or this theme, it made me think about my fraternity. And I knew that there were going to be some males in the room who needed to learn a few things, or could use a little bit of inspirational knowledge about what manhood really is. So I said, I'll talk about manhood some. Let me give you what I learned as the definition for manhood. According to the dictionary, the free dictionary, it says manhood is the composite of qualities such as courage, determination, and vigor, often thought to be appropriate to a man. When I looked at this definition, I thought to myself, the most important words in that definition are courage and determination. Courage is when you're willing to take a chance to do something that you don't necessarily know what the end result is going to be. Being courageous is essential to being a man. Now, when I think about courage, the first thought that came to mind when I was thinking about it, I happened to see a video. I was with some of my kids about a week ago, some of my students, and we had some video time, and I was supposed to show them a video, and they came in. It was some of my basketball players, and they were like, "Coach, what we gonna watch?" And I was like, "I don't know. What do y'all want to watch?" They were like, "Well, let's watch basketball." I was like, "No, we do basketball all the time." I said, "Have you ever heard of the Freedom Riders?" They were all like, "No." Of course, we all know that Black history isn't taught a whole lot in today's society, in our educational system. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna let you watch this video. So we started watching the video about Freedom Riders. How many of you have ever heard of the Freedom Riders? Good. Freedom Riders, group of people, multiracial, multigendered, who decided that they were gonna take a trip in 1961 by bus from DC to New Orleans. 1961, from DC to New Orleans. Now, DC is fine. Everybody can ride the bus in DC. Everybody can get on the bus, sit in the way you want to in DC. But when you cross into Virginia, the rules change. What I didn't know, through watching the video I found out, that federal law had already been established through court cases that it was against the law to segregate on intrastate busing, on any type of intrastate commerce. So here they are on a bus, riding together. They would sit black, white, male, female, however they felt like sitting, or they had a strategy, and they ride this bus. They come through Virginia, have a little trouble. Get into South Carolina, have a little bit more trouble. Go through Georgia, stop in Atlanta. Dr. King meets with them and tells them that he's heard that there's something special waiting for them when they get in Alabama. When they get in Alabama, something special happens. They blow all the tires out on the bus, the Klan blows all of the tires out on the bus, throw firebombs into the bus, and then hold the door so that they're gonna blow up. Those are the types of things that they had to deal with. The interesting thing was on the video they showed how they had training so that they could accept what was going to happen to them, because it was a nonviolent group. They were led by nonviolent organizations. So they had to actually practice being violated and accepting it. My students didn't understand that. My students had a hard time understanding how do you allow someone to violate you, because they don't understand that sometimes you have to accept things that you don't want to accept for the greater good. There were a lot of people who did a lot of accepting things that they didn't want to accept in order for us to have the opportunities that we have now, for us to deal with the greater good, for us to have the greater good. I also thought about John Lewis. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Selma. How many have seen Selma? Absolutely wonderful movie. Absolutely wonderful. It tells a really good story. I learned a lot about John Lewis watching that story. John Lewis really led the folks that were in Montgomery. He led them across the bridge on Bloody Sunday. But he did more than that. He led them because he was willing to take on whatever was going to happen. Now, I had never seen the bridge. Everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people have heard of Edmund Pettus Bridge, and everybody's heard of Bloody Sunday. But if you've never had the opportunity to go to Selma and experience it for yourself, it's a wonderful experience. Mine was kind of happenstance. We were leaving New Orleans. How many of you know how to get from New Orleans to Americus? Okay, New Orleans to Americus is a pretty easy trip. Get on 10, get off on 65, 85, blah, blah, blah. Well, we made a mistake and made a turn and ended up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So we had to take Highway 80 to come back home. And I realized once we got on Highway 80, we were going through Selma. And I said, when we go through Selma, I want to see the bridge, because I'm not saying it was on my bucket list, but experiencing seeing what they experienced was going to be something that I took advantage of while I was there. So when we were in Selma, we went to see the bridge in Selma. And at the base of the bridge is a monument to Bloody Sunday. If you haven't experienced it, haven't seen it, it's a wonderful experience. If you're ever going through that way, take advantage of it. I also thought about a guy who was from here, a young man whose name was Elbert Head. Elbert Head was a slave in Americus, Georgia, in the 1850s and 60s, who went on to become a millionaire. He went from a slave to a millionaire in a matter of about 10 years. He bought property. He became a philanthropist. He was a Republican Party leader. He was on the school board. He even established the school, built the school himself. He was on the school board, and he actually became the first black juror ever in Sumter County. This was in the 1880s. I can't imagine what he must have endured, first as a slave, then as he worked his way through this society the society that he was living in at the time, in order to be what he became. That was courage. So it's really important, as I said, as men, that we're courageous. Again, not necessarily for our own good, but for the greater good. Another, or the second of our pillars that we stand on is scholarship. Scholarship, to me, is deeper than just trying to be a scholar or doing it in school. It's also about life, because everyone knows that sometimes experience is a great teacher. So as you go through your life, you have to understand that. You have to put yourself in positions where you can learn as much as you possibly can, because every situation where you learn isn't necessarily going to be an educational setting. As I stand here today, there may be something that I give you or say to you that you can take and you can put into your life, or that you can take with you and you can share with someone else. And in that is scholarship, because you've educated yourself or you've gained knowledge, because that's what scholarship is all about. When I came to Southwestern on an academic scholarship. I'll never forget how it happened. I was a student in high school, had every plan on going to Morehouse. Lady who was my algebra teacher in high school had started working at Southwestern as an admissions counselor. She came to our honors day. She walked up to me. She said, "So Rodney, what do you plan on doing after high school?" I said, "I'm going to Morehouse." She said, I think she may have asked me how was I going to afford it. I told her they had offered me an academic scholarship. They were going to pay for my tuition. I just had to figure out a way to pay for everything else. She said, "Well, that's going to be kind of costly." I had looked into it, and it was. And I had visited the school, and I loved the mystique of Morehouse. When I was a kid or a teen, high school student, I wanted to be a Morehouse man. So then we started having some more conversation, and she said, "So what would I have to do in order?" No, she said, "Have you ever considered Georgia Southwestern?" I said, "Not really." She said, "Well, what would it take for you to consider Southwestern?" I said, "I've always been this way. Can I get it for free?" She said, "I don't know about that, but I can work on it." She called me back a couple of weeks later. She said, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" She said, "Well, Johnny Isaacson Sr. wants to offer a scholarship to a student from Sumter County. And when I found out about it, the first person I thought about was you. Are you interested?" I said, "What does it pay?" She said, 4 years, no tuition. I said, "That sounds like a winner." She said, "All you need to do is apply." Now, mind you, I hadn't even applied to Southwestern at the time. She said, "Fill out an application, give it to me, and we'll see what happens." I filled out an application. That's why I'm standing here now, because for the next 4 years of my life, I never paid a dime of tuition to Georgia Southwestern State University. Well, Georgia Southwestern College at the time, because it was paid for through Johnny Isaacson Scholarship. Again, it's always important the impression that you make on someone when you come in contact with them. I never thought that my algebra teacher would be able to get me a college scholarship to go to school for free. But that's the way that it worked out. If I had given her a bad impression, or if she thought lowly of me rather than highly of me, I wouldn't be standing here. I wouldn't have gone to Southwestern. I wouldn't have gotten the degree I got. So those things are important. Scholarship. The next one is perseverance. Perseverance is that drive that pushes you to continue to strive for an accomplishment despite difficulties and delays. In life, you have good days and you have bad days. I'm sure we all have those. You have ups, you have downs. For that matter, you have good tests, you have some bad tests. Life is a series of triumphs and failures. You have to understand that your setbacks, though, or look at it as if your setbacks are just setups for a comeback. Let me say that again. I want you to always think that your setbacks are nothing but a setup for a comeback. So, in being a person of perseverance, or having perseverance as a quality, sometimes we don't think about and take advantage of the rights and the privileges that we have now. You know, a lot of people did a lot of things in order for us to be able to do all the things that we can do now. You know, I was talking to you a little while ago about the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass was a slave who eventually bought himself out of slavery after being a runaway slave. He ended up going back and he had to pay his master in order to become free. I can't imagine what that's like, to have to pay someone to be free. And most of us can't imagine that because we've never had to. Freedom for us is the ability to do anything that we want to do, to become anything that we want to become, and all we have to do is put our mind to it. There is nothing in the world that you can't become. Nothing. If you want to be the president of the United States, as long as you meet those basic qualifications, citizenship, age, etc., you can be the president of the United States. If you don't believe it, I'm sure there are 45 people who can tell you that they never imagined that they were going to be the president of the United States until at some point in their life they decided that's what they wanted to do. So you could do anything. Anything is possible. And those things that are possible because of someone else's perseverance, what they went through, the things that they put themselves through in order to afford us all of the opportunities that we have. I learned that Frederick Douglass he went from being a slave, like I said, to a runaway, to a free man, and actually he was the first African American to be on the presidential ballot. He ran for vice president, or he was nominated for vice president in 1872. Didn't know it, never knew it. 1872, imagine him being on the ballot, a former slave, to be vice president of the United States. Unimaginable for me. The last one of our pillars that I want to talk about is uplift. Now, when you talk about uplift, you're talking about being willing to reach back and pull somebody else up when they're down. First person that came to mind when I was thinking about it was Harriet Tubman. Don't know how many of you know who Harriet Tubman was, but most people do. She was the leader of the Underground Railroad. Of course, you know, the Underground Railroad, I had to tell my kids, wasn't really a railroad. It was just a whole bunch of houses that were set up so that when a runaway was on the run, they had safe houses or safe places. It might be a safe barn, it might be a safe house or a safe building of some type for them to hide in so that they could move on as they were trying to escape to freedom. But she was originally a slave who had done it herself and then spent the rest of her life going back to get other people to do the same thing. How many of us, when we struggle and we make it through something, are willing to then go back and pull somebody else through? Or are we happy that we have it ourselves and now we want to sit down on our own laurels. It's important that we give back. It's important that we uplift other people. The beauty of my position, and when I say my position, I mean my job, as a teacher is every day I have an impact on the lives of children. Every day I have an opportunity to make a positive impact on the lives of children. And I deal with children who really, a lot of the children that I deal with really need that positive impact. And when you give it to them, they cling to it. They appreciate it. Now, some of you have some time on your hands. You might be in school, however many days, hours of the day as you are, but you still have some time on your hands. And one of the things that I want to talk to all of you about is becoming a mentor. There are organizations on campus and organizations in the community who are looking for people who are willing to give some time, just some time. It's not going to cost you anything. I remember seeing mentors come into the school, and all they would do was come in, sign in, get the child. They come up, they might play Uno, they might play checkers, they might play Connect Four. But for that child, once a week on whatever day, whenever that mentor was supposed to come, they were looking at the clock because it was really important to that child that they had an opportunity to spend time with that mentor. And I want to implore each of you, if you're not already involved, get involved. Become a mentor. Now, I know everyone doesn't necessarily feel comfortable being a mentor. And that's understandable because everybody can't do everything. But there are things that you can do to give back. When I remember shortly after I became an Omega, our fraternity formed a partnership with Habitat for Humanity. And we started doing things with Habitat for Humanity, including building houses or whatever else needed to be done to try to help that organization. Now, there's a very big reward for the work that you do for Habitat for Humanity. When Miller Fuller established Habitat for Humanity, his idea was he wanted to get rid of substandard housing. So he started building houses for people. But you can't just get a house because you go in and say, I want one. In order to get the house, you have to earn the house. So you have to put in man hours. You have to put in man hours helping someone else. And then you also have to put in man hours helping yourself when it's time for you to get yours. So they're always looking for volunteers, always accepting someone who's willing to come in and help. There's 2 organizations in America that you can deal with. You could do Habitat for Humanity or even the Miller Fuller Center for Housing, both of which are always looking for volunteers. So that's another opportunity for us to give uplift. Thirdly, lastly, it's a voting year, a presidential voting year. 2016 is going to be a real big election, a really big election. Because the question is the next person who comes in behind President Obama going to continue doing the things the way they've been done, or are they going to come in and try to change the way that things have been going for the last 8 years? That's where we are. Now, I'm not standing here trying to tell everybody that you need to vote for this person or vote for that. You can vote for Trump if you want to, or Hillary, or Bernie, whoever. All I'm trying to tell you is vote. Not just vote yourself, but get involved and register some more people to vote. Voting is one of those things. It's the loudest voice you have as a citizen. In a democratic society, your vote is the loudest voice that you have sometimes in terms of how things are going to go or how things are going to happen. It is really important that people understand how important your one vote can be. I think about the election of 2000, where in Florida, if a few more people had voted one way or the other, well, we'll say voted for Gore, then we never would have had Bush as a president. Not saying Bush was a bad president, I'm just saying we never would have had him, because Gore would have won with a few more votes. And people sometimes feel like my one vote doesn't count. But a few one votes turns into a lot of votes. So it's important that we, as citizens of this great country that we live in the greatest country in the world. This country affords us a lot of opportunities, but it's all based on the fact that we get a vote as to how things are going to be done. So I implore you to go out, get involved, help register some people to vote. Do whatever you can to make this great society that we live in even greater. Now, I'm about to close, and I want to give you a quote that I read, and I really thought that it was a fitting one for this convocation. And it comes from President Obama. He said, "Making your mark on the world is hard. If it were easy, everybody would do it. But it's not. It takes patience, it takes commitment, and it comes with plenty of failure along the way. The real test is not whether you avoid this failure, because you won't. It's whether you let it harden or shame you into inaction, or whether you learn from it, whether you choose to persevere." Thank you.
Let's give him another hand, please.
Appreciate it.
Rodney, you are one of the locals who grew up in Americas, went to college in Americas, decided to stay in Americas, and we need more people like you. You are a role model to the young men in Americas, especially the young kids, because he teaches middle school. You're a successful coach, and you are my friend. So let's give him another applause. The Gospel Choir praise team, let's give them applause for a wonderful. Cam Bennett, Mr. Freshman, thank you for that reflection. Give him a hand. Jordan, let's give him a hand. He gave the welcome. Corey, thank you for that introduction. Let's give him a hand. Now, this is homecoming week. I think on behalf of the faculty, staff, I would like to tell you all to make sure you be safe out there. You know, this world is a strange world right now. Don't have too much fun, but have fun. There are a lot of things going on today, tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday. So make sure you take your time, think, respect other people, and be safe. Everyone stand up, please. I know the motto of AAMI is academic excellence and social responsibility. So I would like for you to repeat after me. Spread the word, across the nation. This is going to be a great generation. Thank you.